Welcome. Today we're talking about hard decisions in RPGs and how to do them properly. On Reddit, I'm constantly seeing people ask how to do hard decisions in RPGs, and I find that I usually run into two problems that a lot of new players have. And before I get to them, I just want to do a quick preamble that this video is mostly for new GMs. If you're a veteran GM, you're probably not going to get much in this video. And if you are a new GM, just remember that this is not like the be-all end-all. There's always a different way to do things, and also the best way to learn is just trying new things. So if you want to try things that are totally against anything I say in this video, just go for it. That's the best way you're going to learn, and also it might work really well in whatever context we're talking about. This is more just sort of general advice if you don't know what you're doing and you want just a little bit of guidance. So the first problem I usually see are people who completely overcomplicate a choice, and I think that is probably the one that most people have run into. And I think it's because RPGs tend to be a bit of like a secondary hobby that has a gateway from like books or video games or TV shows or anything like that. And so a lot of times people will see stuff in that media and want to replicate it in RPGs, which is completely normal. It's kind of why we play RPGs, is that we want to literally do the things that we see in media that are really cool. But with that, a lot of people will see what authors do and try and replicate that, which is a good thing to do. Oftentimes, like, plagiarism and stealing is one of the great foundations of the RPG hobby in terms of running stuff for your friends. Steal and take everything from everybody else and make your campaign better. The thing to remember, though, is that not all your players are going to necessarily want the super difficult stuff that you're doing. You might be running really complex things between a bunch of different factions or a bunch of different people, whatever it might be, and that can just lead to a lot of your players dropping off. I think a lot of players see stuff like the Red Baron questline in The Witcher 3, or they have a favorite book series or a TV show where things come up and they go, I really want to do that here. And I think similarly to any other game, whether you want to do a heavy politics game or you want like an entire economy running in your RPG, you're going to have some players who are on board, and then you're going to really lose the players who aren't. So it's much better to try and find a middle ground. You don't need a really complex setup to make your players have a really hard time making a choice. All you need is a simple setup and some level of attachment from the players, not necessarily in terms of like a deep connection with the characters involved, but perhaps more with their morals and how they see things. Obviously, if 1,000 NPCs die in an RPG game, not all players are going to deeply care about that thing exactly, but they're playing characters who might be completely horrified that, you know, some guy just wiped out 1,000 people. I'll even give a recent example of what I mean. I'm currently running a Starts Without Numbers sandbox game for two of my friends, and one mission they were given was from a sort of shady contact from before, reaching out to them for a job, and the pay was really good. Like the kind of pay where it's like, we really can't turn this down. And the job was to go assassinate somebody, which is already a little bit of a screw being turned in. And to give you the sort of the basic setup, and this pretty much was the setup I gave the players, you're actually not missing much context just outside of some other greater campaign things in the background. The reason why the job paid so much was for a few things. The guy was really bad, he was a terrorist they were looking for. When the players got the job, he was currently en route to getting sanctuary in this like horrible pirate-infested area because he had a few favors he called in with those pirate gangs. And the other complication that was added for him to sort of circumvent the corporations looking for him, he was posing as a slave on a slave ship that was headed towards this pirate gang territory. But the thing is that he was in there with a bunch of other actual slaves, just completely innocent people in a horrible situation. And that was the entire setup. They were given the location of where they were. It wasn't a difficult setup in terms of mechanics. They weren't outgunned or anything like that. All it was a prisoner transport with no guns and had an escort fighter, which was the same thing they had. And the choice they had to make, because it was already a hard choice if they wanted to take this job for the money, was, do we go in the ship and just kill the guy or take him or whatever and deal with armed guards on the ship? Or do we make our life just easy and just blow the fuck out of the entire thing, killing a bunch of innocent people? And that was the main debate for a good while between the two players. And that's not a difficult setup, because we had one player who was trying to play this sort of more moralistic kind of character, and the other person who's more of a mercenary, listen, money's money, and we really need money right now, sort of thing. So he was fully down to just blow the whole thing up and just be done with it, and the other player really didn't want that. Which I will say, to add to this, because this is one thing to keep in mind, that did make it a more interesting thing. You might not get that. They could both be moralistic and turn down the whole thing, and then we would just do a whole improv session. Or they might have both been like, yeah, let's go do it, and then blow it up, which could have its own repercussions. Because the other thing too is that even if all the characters agree on the morals of it, whether they're both immoral or moral, that doesn't mean that there aren't consequences from those actions. They might pick the more moralistic one purely because it makes you less enemies, or vice versa. But they were highly debating how to deal with this, because it really came down to more dangerous but the right thing to do, or way less dangerous but the absolute horrible evil thing to do. And you can see that's not like really a whole giant setup. There's not different pirate factions where one of them is aligned with the characters, the other one's against them. There's a person on board they need to deal with. They're dealing with 2 other corporations in the back who are also moving. There's not all these moving parts. It was very simple. It was, do we kill a man or do we kill a man and hundreds of innocent people? So at first they tried doing the right thing by just destroying the fighter and getting into the ship, but things just kept going horribly wrong for them. Their roles were not saving them at all. And then eventually it led to them just having the moralistic one just get completely knocked out. The other guy had to save him. And then with him out and not having a sort of say anymore, he just blew the whole thing up. And it was a really, really fantastic session. It was super tense. It was a really crazy thing. And there wasn't that much time put into the difficult choice. It was just a very simple setup. But it led to all these things that happened because that little setup goes into all these bigger things. I made the reward on that job really high for a reason. I want them to make the choice that they were probably going to do this. But the thing was, they always had a choice to turn that down. But part of me went like, this is just another little bit added where it's like, this is a lot of money. So we actually have an impact. We are actually engaged with this thing because we could do this, but we're not assassins. This has never been a job we've done before. We have been doing, you know, some random side jobs and this and that, but we haven't done like an actual murder. Everybody they killed so far has been self-defense. And I feel like I could probably make a politics video that's pretty much the same advice. The context is just different. That a lot of politics really comes from 2 sides wanting a thing and then it just expands. And I might do a video on politics, but it will have a lot of parallels to this video, so I'm just gonna throw this part in with it. And that really is one of those things where if you do want a more political difficult decision, just remember that you don't need, again, 10 different factions all working in their own agendas, and you have to keep track of all these things and you're stressing out because you have all these background schedules that you're rolling on or doing, or keeping track of where characters are in relation to where your players are. You don't need any of that. The big thing is that if there's 2 big factions that both want one thing and they're willing to do anything for it, so much just organically comes out of that. And on top of that, I feel like I'll throw in economics here as well. I gotta say, I have seen this too many times. Nobody ever does it because it's a lot of work, and people who say sort of things tend to not actually even, you know, finish session 1. I've seen some people say that they want to make fully formed economics, and this is totally off topic right now, by the way, fully formed economics running in the background like you're playing Victoria. And I've always been like, but why though? The players probably don't want that, and if they do, like, video games are so much better at simulating that. It is totally fine to have an economy in your game. If you have an economy that you want to do, I think that's totally great, but again, you don't need difficult stuff. The economy at its basis form, in the form that's interesting to the players, a lot of people want something, and it might be hard to get. So if you're noticing, there's a lot of sort of repeating here with all these different things you can do on very complex topics. It's not hard to just go with, okay, we want a city and their main sort of thing is textiles and clothing, and perhaps there's a lot of farms in the area that have a lot of sheep with wool and other stuff, and then right from there you can have a whole economy going where they feed into that feeds back into them with money and whatever else. You might have somebody with a gold mine over here who's willing to be able to buy really nice clothes, who puts more money into this thing, and then suddenly things are moving around. You don't need to simulate how many things were sold that day or anything like that. You might just need to go, all right, people need these products, who wants this, who wants that, and then you there now have yourself some sort of economy. Because the big thing with all this sort of stuff is that you don't need to actually simulate things like that. All you gotta do is make it look believable to the players. So getting back on topic, that's sort of my first advice for the first problem I see. And I can't stress enough, there's more than one way to do this. So if you want to add more elements to make it more complex and difficult, then do it. You might be looking at me right now going, yeah, that's pretty cool, and I'm glad your group had fun doing that, but I want something just a little bit more complex still. I would say my advice still stands, because all you have to do is just start with that and then add more elements to it. If you get overwhelmed going, I need all these things, and they never actually start it, that's a problem. And that's just general advice for writing or doing any sort of RPG stuff, is that it just starts somewhere. There's a lot of advice on the internet if you want to do a sandbox campaign, and it's your own material. Just start with the village, start with the surrounding area, little hamlet, whatever it might be, perhaps just the village and a small dungeon. And this is the same thing. Start with the ship and the slaves, and then perhaps throw in suddenly a corporation comes out of nowhere and attacks the ship because they're going after somebody completely different who might be on the ship. Maybe they're for the players, maybe they're protecting their own assets. Hell, it could be a ship that's coming in and it's being pursued by 2 more ships, and suddenly there's just a space battle happening right next door, just on circumstance that you've now added this thing. And now we're gonna get to the second problem I normally see. And this is something that I'm guilty of doing every once in a while, just by the happenstance, because I do a lot of improv, and sometimes things take me down a way that I go, oh crap, I've ridden ourselves into a really tough decision here that I did not mean to. And that second problem is the difficult choice doesn't really matter in the end, because both outcomes are equally shitty. And that can be really fun. I mean, that can be a fantastic way to make things really dark and gritty, is that no matter what choice they make, there is just gonna be repercussions for their actions. And that's just good writing, but you can easily tip the scales too far. This is also very system dependent. There's lots of RPGs that have mechanics in place for this exact thing to deal with hard decisions. Sometimes the whole point of the RPG you're playing is that every session you're gonna just have hard choices. That's just what the game's about, and that a lot of times neither outcome is all that nice. But there's a few things that you can do to alleviate this. Firstly, you can have NPCs or ideals the characters actually care about. Things where it goes, yeah, this is a bad choice, but this will still save my friend, or this keeps the peace in this area that I care about. Sure, all these people over here I don't care about will die, and that sucks, but my character doesn't really care about them, and he's gonna go with this. But there are some times where you can just have every choice be completely crushing, and the players kind of become disengaged because they go, alright, well fuck me then, I guess we'll just go with A or B, because either way, it doesn't really matter, shit's just fucked. It can be really bad depending on the game you're doing and the characters you have, but I think what's worse is that if you do that too much. I think if every choice players come across, there's never a break in the waves just slapping them in the face over and over and over again. You can get players just going like, well, I don't really care that much anymore about this because things are just too brutal. And this is a really bad analogy because it's a show that everybody loves, and I do like it myself, but it just became too brutal at a certain point. For me, that's Breaking Bad. I believe it's around season 3. There were so many shady things that just kept happening in that show where I just stopped caring. I guess part of it is that I didn't really care to see how far somebody would go once they go down that road. I do think there's a lot of interesting things. I think it's a really well-made show. The story, the writing, the characters, everything else is great. The problem for me was just that at certain points, like, yeah, I know humans are terrible. Like, yeah, anybody who looks at history, you go, yeah, humans will do the worst shit. That's not really keeping me watching more than anything. I know I'm probably pissing off a load of people right now by saying that, but I just fell off. I still think it's a great show, and I might go back to it again someday. But it became so brutal where I was like, I don't care about any of these characters. If they die, they die, and they probably deserve it. And so that's where my issues came in with that. There was no way really to attach myself to, and the players may find the same thing, either purposely disattach themselves because they go, there's no point in even, yeah, person X over here, yeah, they're a fun NPC, yeah, they got a funny voice, and you know, they're entertaining. I can't wait for this GM who's killed the last 3 characters who are very similar to this one, and just for them to do it again. So keep that in mind. And to give an example of me doing that, I was running a Vaesen game for my friends about a year ago now. I can't remember the exact details, but they were going to this industrial town up north, and essentially it had been taken over by this completely crazy evangelical priest who has basically started like a witch hunt against people in the town. And there was also a Vaesen doing some pretty terrible things. And I'm just gonna cut everything pretty short here. But essentially they finally got to the end of it, and they found the Vaesen and they confronted it. The problem was that they were confronted with the truth that both the priest was really shitty and people were dying by his hand, but the Vaesen was also equally shitty and was just doing stuff to the town and fucking things up because it had also become like twisted and warped by the fact that the town had gone crazy with logging and, you know, mining and everything else. Very classic sort of Vaesen stuff. But essentially what I had given them was no real good decision. The Vaesen one was a bit of a better decision, but that's because I tend to play my Vaesen games very misanthropically, and the Vaesen was just basically going to just reconsume the town, and if they didn't, the town was just going to expand insanely and just sort of destroy the local environment. At the end of the day, they sided with the Vaesen, but the choices put in front of them were just kind of like, alright, well, people are gonna die either way because we got this crazy priest who's going on a fucking nutso rampage, and it's gonna continue because this Vaesen's gonna keep dealing with them. So what are we gonna do here? It was still a really fun time. The players weren't pissed or anything, but we all kind of had a good laugh in the moment as I kind of just paused and went, oh fuck, what did I just put you guys into? So yeah, so if you're gonna make really hard choices where neither side's good, I think anybody looking for a good example of it really well done is the Bloody Baron questline, as I mentioned earlier in Witcher 3, where either choice you make, I'm not gonna go into spoilers here for anybody who hasn't played it, but either choice you make, there is a good bright side to it, and there's also a dark downside that happened because of it, which I think is the best way to do that, is that even if the decision sucks, making them dour where both are bad doesn't work that well, but if there's a glimmer of hope in one or both of them, that will help the players or make it feel like what they did was worth it. But if you make every character an asshole they come across, if everybody's terrible, they're either, there's just lurking monsters in the darkness who are just there to kill, and everybody in town is just a terrible person that are assholes with the PCs, the players aren't gonna care. That's not dark and gritty, that's just pointless, and nobody has fun with that, because if the players don't care about anything or anyone, they're just gonna be very hollow choices, where they might just go, all right, we'll just do, A is gonna finish the session up in, 10 minutes, B is gonna prolong it for 2 hours. I don't care about anybody here, let's just do A. Let's just fucking go home, because this sucks. So if you do also want to make it feel like at least their decision is dark and gritty and really tough, but they still got something out of it, make something that they are actually attached to a part of it. Otherwise, it's not gonna matter. And that's pretty much the video. There might be a follow-up video to this one. I mostly just want to throw my 2 cents out there because I think it's pretty easy to do hard decisions. Maybe saying easy isn't the best way to put that, especially for somebody who's anxious about, doing it properly. But I would say it's not nearly as difficult as you're making it out to be. All you really need is, like I said, start with those small, simple elements. It can just be motivations. 2 people want a thing, and that can spark so much out of just that. Just start small and then just grow it bigger. Probably get some fantastic moments out of your campaigns. And the thing too is that if you don't, even if you fuck it up, they'll still have fun. I fucked up that Vaesen thing where I gave my players no real good choice, and we just started laughing because it ended up becoming ridiculous how bad things were. Hard decisions and accents are like 2 things I think all GMs really want to improve at. So I hope this helped for some people. If you have any fun stories of how hard decisions went right or horribly wrong for you in your campaigns, I'd love to hear them. I love hearing RPG stories, especially ones that go terribly wrong. And if you agree or disagree with my advice, please let me know. I'm always interested to hear what people say. I have a bunch of other videos on RPGs out there, from actual plays to reviews, so feel free to check those out. I also have a Discord, and I stream on Twitch, and I also have an actual play podcast where I put all the long play actual plays in. So all those will be in the description. I hope you guys have a good one, and stay safe out there.